With the year winding down, it's time for my top 5 lists. Now today's list, we're going to be taking a look at my top 5 hobby items for 2018. So when I talk about hobby items, let's qualify what I'm talking about here. I mean things that I use when I'm assembling, building, painting miniatures. This could be everything from accessories, from companies that sell different types of like add-ons, like bases, paints, brushes, and even just general hobby supplies. And they might even be things that are like intended for hobby use. Let's kick it off right now with number 5, and that is Privateer Press P3 Paint Coal Black. This is probably one of my most used paint colors. I use it all the time for airbrushing, and in fact, in probably 4 of my 4 at least different army projects for this year, I used it as a airbrush paint to give a wonderful sort of like blue-gray shimmer to black. You get kind of a raven feather, almost like reflection over a black primer. And I get asked about it all the time, so it hits the number 5 list here. It's actually, funnily enough, the only P3 paint that Lords of War Games and Hobbies used to stock, because it was so important. When they first opened, they couldn't stock everything, but they stocked that one paint color. It was so important to painting black for everybody that was there, that they always had sort of like a little surplus of it in the store. I think they do carry P3 paints now, but they made sure they had coal black on the rack because everybody was using it. So if you look at my Death Watch, if you look at my Night's Watch, lots of watch armies. If you look at even the basic black that I put down on my JSA for Infinity, that all started as P3 Coal Black, just over a black undercoat through my airbrush, and so that makes it my number 5 hobby item for 2018. In the number 4 spot, we've got Citadel's Valhallan Snow. This is one of the texture technical paints that I used like 5 or 6 pots of it just in the last 3 months, mostly because of my Song of Ice and Fire projects that I've been doing. But this is a wonderful time-saving item. You can easily mix up your own sort of like paint pastes for doing a snow effect. There's lots of flocks out there you can buy, tons of things, but the easiest way to do it is just fine grit sand, white glue, and then a lot of white paint just to color it all when you're done. Make a paste out of that, mix it up, put it in your bases. It's literally the same thing as the Valhallan Snow is. But that being said, the Valhallan Snow is so quick and easy. You open the pot and you just spade it out onto a base, move it around to where you want it to be, and it dries perfectly. I loved it because I don't like mixing up batches of snow and then wasting a bunch of it as I go through, and then even flocking it afterwards. I'm doing big army projects. I just want to get it out of the pot and on as fast as possible. I had the entire Night's Watch army plus the Stark army with 2 pots of that stuff. So for me, the time savings is completely worth it. 100%. If you're going to do snow on your bases, like just off and on, having a pot of this texture paint in your arsenal basically saves you a ton of time and has a snow effect just ready to go without any mixing. And if you want to get lots of things done, that is a huge sort of like quality of life improvement, is not having to waste time putting that stuff together and making it each time you want to use it. In the number 3 spot, we've got Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch Paint Plus Primer Flat Black. This stuff retails in Canada for like $5.99 a can, and it is the most stable, generally sort of like reliable primer you can find off the shelf. You can find it at Walmart, you can find it in Canada, Canadian Tire. Great tradition of buying all my stuff at Canadian Tire because it's nearby and I get my Canadian Tire bucks back. And it is a perfect miniature primer. It shrinks really well, doesn't cover up too much detail, and it applies just as well to plastic as it does to metal. So I've had no problems with it. I've probably gone through 30 or 40 cans of it this year. If you look at the amount of stuff I've painted this year, there's a picture right now on my Facebook page. You can go and look at the top banner of my Facebook page. You can see sort of a panorama of the 1,000 or so miniatures that I painted this year. And we went through lots of cans of that. The flat white also works really well if you want to do some like quick zenithal sort of like shading, zap it with black, zap it from above with some white. And I've had no problems with it over the course of the year. So great, quick, like you want to buy lots of cans, $6 a can. There's other companies, of course, that make similar products, Krylon and stuff too. But I've had no problem with this particular one, so it's my number 3 pick for hobby item for 2018. In the number 2 spot, we've got Guerrilla Glue Cyanacrylate Super Glue. It's available readily from pretty much any hardware store. And it's basically the old Games Workshop super glue from the early 2000s. I've used 2 different kinds. For doing terrain, I very often use the green lidded gel one because it gap fills a little bit. You can put it on and it'll seal the gaps together if there's any kind of like sort of like spreading, or if even just the laser cutting for MDF terrain isn't completely flush. And I use the general sort of blue lidded one for all my miniature assembly while I'm pinning models and stuff like that. It's great, it's reliable, it's cheap, it lasts. I've never really had a nozzle problem with it where, you know, the nozzle gets clogged or dries up or gets all like gunky and gross. So it's been a fantastic hobby item for me this year. And just like the primer that I talked about in number 3, I've probably gone through 20 or 25 tubes of it over the course of the year, just putting stuff together. So there's my number 2. Number 1. So the top spot for my hobby items for 2018 are going to be the Ready for Battle bases. Holy moly, I can't believe no one's ever done this before, but bases that are painted, ready to go to the box with tufts of flight. All you have to do is pin your guys down to them. What a great idea and what a huge time savers. I've done 2 armies now with them. I've done my Caledonians for Infinity, as well as rebasing my entire Ariadne attack army, Tartary Army Corps, in them as well. And they are just, they're wonderful, they're great to look at, and they're just done. So if you want some time savings and you're willing to fork out a little extra cash for your bases, they're not that much more expensive than just buying textured resin bases, and they're just finished, they're ready to go. If you paint on a pin, or if you paint your models without assembling them, like do a lot of airbrushing and stuff, these are just a great way to get stuff done. And you can even touch them up and paint them a little bit more if you want as well. But they're fantastic. I highly recommend them. They came a little bit late in the year as far as just like when they, like I've been using them for about halfway through the year, but they jumped right to the top, and I couldn't believe that no one had ever done this before because they were just such a neat sort of like new thing. They were something somebody hadn't thought of yet, which is why I was so impressed by them, and they got my top hobby item for 2018. So anyway, let's take a look at another list tomorrow. Till then, I'm Ash. Have a great evening. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to support the channel, of course, like and subscribe and hit the little bell below so you get notifications when I post future content. I do post stuff 7 days a week. If you want to support the channel further, you can, of course, buy a t-shirt through Spreadshirts, buy a measuring gauge or objective markers from Death Ray Designs, or, of course, most importantly, there is Patreon. Patreon is what makes all this possible, keeps the lights on, pays for the studio costs, pays for the equipment, model costs, and everything else, and most importantly, puts food in my kids' bellies and a roof over their heads. Big thanks to everyone, past, future, who supported me. I do this stuff because of you guys, and of course, I will continue doing it as long as I can.